But when she said your guys' names, I was like, yes, like selfishly, because you guys have great reputations and a bunch of people know you. And so if you're on here, I'm hoping your people get to see this as well and hopefully get Dawn some more support. So
yeah, I
thank
went
you.
ahead and started recording right now. So
Okay.
yeah, take it away, Nick. You can introduce kind of what we're doing here. And
oh, like, yeah, so Nick Cunningham, I'm Point Equity. We're a small mortgage brokerage in Roseville, California. And I had a mortgage company before in 2007, 2008, and somebody had approached me to start a nonprofit for foster youth. And that started this journey of becoming my full-time job and my life's mission. And I remember having lunch with Don at Fats, like 2007. And I think he could tell I had no clue what I was doing. And, but it was cool. It became a big part of my life. And I walked out of mortgage for 7 years. And ultimately, after doing my own thing, Dawn consumed my nonprofit so that it could, you know, be even better. And then I became an employee for Dawn and was actually a case supervisor. And unfortunately, started dating Kelly and got serious about having a family. And as much as I loved the job, I lived above a garage and couldn't even afford internet. But so I dove back into mortgage, which I, you know, have a new passion for, but I still, you know, my heart is supporting local youth and foster kids. And so we support Dawn. We love Dawn. We love the organization. And Katie brought up that, and I think you or I don't know who I was talking to, Dawn, but CPS reports and referrals are up due to the COVID because families are in tight environments.
right.
If they already had challenges, that support's more difficult to provide due to the quarantine. And not only did they need help before, but the community and those kids need more helps more so than ever. So that's my 10,000 foot view. And I'm going to kick it over to Dawn. So you can just maybe give the community a refresher on who you guys are, what you do, and then we can go into maybe some different ways that people could support the kids right now.
Thank you, Nick. I'm Don Kleinfelder. I'm the Executive Director for Child Advocates of Placer County. We do the court-appointed special advocate program for Placer County. And just, I'll give you my real quick Rotary Club spiel of what CASA is all about. So back in the 1970s, a judge up in Seattle, Washington, who'd worked with civil law, had been moved over into juvenile court. And in that juvenile court, he was involved in foster youth cases. And it turned out that whereas in civil law, you have days, weeks to decide a decision, come up with a decision as a judge, in juvenile court, you have maybe 15 minutes. And you have maybe 12 cases you have to hear between 9 and noon. And he realized pretty quickly that he just had no clue what was in the best interest of these kids. And he's got little ones walking in there, and it's like, do I remove this 5-year-old from her mom because of a boyfriend, or do I keep them together? And that's where he realized, you know, social workers don't get to meet that often with the kids. They've got big loads. Attorneys have huge loads. Who could tell him what does the child really want and what does the child really need? And so he started the very first court-appointed special advocate program, where he brought in some friends, taught them how the courtroom works, gave them a court order, says, go out there and investigate on my behalf. And so that's how CASA began. It's a strange acronym, Court-Appointed Special Advocate. It doesn't mean anything to anybody. It doesn't explain what it's all about. It should be Court-Appointed Child Advocates, but that would be CACA, which is a worst acronym. So we're stuck with CASA for now. So every county has its own superior court. And within that superior court is a juvenile division. And within that juvenile division is the family law, which we don't really deal with. That's divorces, custody battles. There's delinquency, where the kids have been arrested and they're on probation, or they're in the juvenile detention facility. We go in there a little bit. And then there's a court called dependency court. And that's the one where kids are removed from the homes because they've been abandoned, neglected, or abused. And temporarily, they become dependents of the court. And parental rights are suspended as the court figures out, what do we do with these kids? So we run that for Placer County. And I should say, as I continue on, I'll be speaking about Placer County. But just to be, so everyone's aware, there's also a CASA program in Sacramento, Yolo, El Dorado. Every county has its own CASA program tied to its superior court. So I stay within Placer, Sac stays within Sac, and so forth. In my county, we have about 400 kids a year that end up in foster care. And we serve about 80 to 90% of them, depending. I mean, it kind of goes in waves. We'll have times when there's very few kids showing up in detention, and other times where there's just a whole bunch of them rolling in. Typically, they are around when school starts or when school ends because teachers are reporting them. They're also around Christmas time because there's a lot of issues around that. And when these referrals come in, we take a community volunteer who's gone through our 30 hours of training, and they've been sworn in by our judge to become officers of the court. We give them that court order, and they can go out and they can talk to teachers, doctors, therapists, parents, anyone that they think they need to talk to find out exactly what the judge wants to know, which is what is in that child's best interest and what does that child really want to have happen. Not always the same thing, especially when you're dealing with teenagers who maybe want to be emancipated and that's what they want, but it's not in their best interest. So right now I have about 300 kids that we're working with in foster care and in delinquency, and actually some kids also involved in sex trafficking, and with about 250 CASA volunteers. And we have a class that's going on right now, and we're going along pretty well, meeting the need as much as we thought we would need to. And then suddenly in the last 6 weeks, there's been this huge influx of kids coming into foster care. We had 20 kids on a wait list about a month and a half ago, and now we're up to 50. I have a class being trained right now. I've got some former volunteers who've stepped up and said, yes, I'll come back on and advocate for these kids. But these aren't kids being reported by teachers. These are all through law enforcement, which means something bad happened. And law enforcement showed up at the house and took the kids away because, the stresses of COVID-19 on the families, a lot of the parents who are already maybe just getting by and have questionable practices are getting more involved. It's mostly substance abuse, alcohol. It's mostly abandonment more than neglect, but not abandonment, but it's more neglect than abuse, I should say. Kids aren't necessarily being abused, but they are being neglected a lot. And enough so that the county says, yeah, we got to take the kids out of court. So that's where we are right now. We're just trying to work really hard to meet the need of all these kids. And at the same time, the big issue that we're having, and I'm sure other CASA programs are having this, is that our major fundraising events have been canceled. We had a Big T set up in March. We had a golf tournament set for this coming June. The Great American Triathlon, which is in July, we're a beneficiary of that. All three have been canceled. So I see that now for the first time in 13 years, probably going to end this year with a deficit, which is, we'll get by, but it's not good. So as I talk about ways that we need help, there's two areas. One, we need more volunteers. And a silver lining with this whole COVID situation is that we are doing our trainings online and we're recording them with Zoom. And so we're looking at, can we take these recorded trainings and then put smaller groups of people through in the interim between our big classes and just keep building up the number of volunteers that we have. And I think there's a way that we're going to be able to do that. So Zoom, recording through Zoom is actually, like I said, our one silver lining so far with the COVID-19. And then the other areas that we just, again, we're always looking for help with funding. Big Day of Giving is coming up on May 7th. We're asking 1,000 people to each donate $30 to us so that we can raise $30,000, which would cover the cost of a CASA for a kid for 1 year, for 30 CASAs. I'm sorry, 30 kids for 1 year. It's $1,000 a year to have a CASA. So that's really where we are, what we're looking for in terms of help.
That's great. Okay, very cool. So the trainings are going okay virtual. Are the volunteers allowed to see the kids right now? How are they managing that?
No. So at this point, all right, so it's really in flux. Judicial Council, originally the judge had issued an emergency order saying no face-to-face meetings between social workers and kids, between CASAs and kids, and then Judicial Council came back, that's the state branch that oversees all the courts. They said, kids and families cannot be separated. Kids and social workers, that needs to be worked out, but there has to be some level of face-to-face interaction. So we have not moved to that yet. At this point, everything's remote, but we are looking to follow the lead of the social workers. So whatever they end up doing and they're working out the details, we will follow suit. Probably it's going to be something where if you're assigned to a new case, you would meet the kid once, socially distanced, bigger than my screen will show, and just to get that face-to-face and then do everything mostly, remotely. Maybe meeting face-to-face Well, probably not until things really settle down. If you already are an existing case, what we say is don't go out there. You already have a relationship with the kid, just keep doing it remotely. And so it's been really fun. We have some volunteers. One is working with a 4-year-old, and they do coloring on some remote coloring thing, so they can share, they can color like coloring books together. We have a lot of them that are doing games together. There's just coming up with very creative ways. Of course, there's free music and all kinds of wonderful things happening, so they'll get on together and share these things remotely. The issue we're having with some of these children, you know, and this goes for schools as well, is how do they get internet access? We're fortunate that Ticket to Dream Foundation, excuse me, which is part of, used to be part of Sleep Train, they gave us 20 laptops to give to our kids to help them with schoolwork, to help them contact their, stay in connection with their CASA volunteer. But we run into the issue of internet access. If the home does not have internet access, the kid just can't go to the library or go to Starbucks or McDonald's and log into Wi-Fi. So we're struggling with that right now, trying to find a way to get hotspots set up for these kids and their parents, because if they are reunifying with their parents, you know, we need to have an ability to do that as well. And then one area where my program is different from the other CASA programs is that we also do a whole family approach. So not only do we provide CASAs to the kids, but for a lot of our families, we provide a family mentor, or to some of our families who are not involved in the system, but are struggling to make ends meet, we also provide allies, we call them, which are volunteers to help them navigate the system and climb out of that cycle of poverty. So that's where we sit today.
Do you need more laptops, or are you guys?
No, Ticket to Dream is awesome. They have a lot of laptops that have been given to them recently. I forget what company donated them, and they're great ones. They're not like the old super clunky ones. They're, I think they're all solid state, and they've been totally wiped clean, not only internally but externally as well. And we have still some sitting in the office, but if we ever need more, Ticket to Dream says just call. They'll get them to us.
So you need bodies, you need people to volunteer, go through the training online and take on these cases. Who would they contact if they were interested in becoming a volunteer?
They could go to our website, casaplacer.org, placercasa.org, and it says right there in big letters, right on the main screen, become a volunteer. And so that would be the first step. The other area, though, that we need help is just in recruiting volunteers, finding people. I mean, you know, the people that want to volunteer, they find us, but there's people out there. CASA is not a really well-known entity. So, you know, like Nick, what you're doing is posting that thing in the magazine with Katie that talks about child advocates of Placer County. So we're working hard, working with California CASA Association to try to market our program better, but I'm marketing the brand and child advocates, and CASA in general is just something that we need help with. There's nothing coming down from National CASA or California CASA much in terms of marketing. So the more help we can get with just letting people know what we do and how they can help, the better. Because once, I mean, it's hard to wrap your hands around the idea of CASA. People are like, is that like a restaurant, or, you know, what is CASA exactly? Once they get the idea of what it's really about and they volunteer, they love it. It's an incredible opportunity, and it's not nearly as daunting as some people think it is when they first get into it, especially when they talk to other volunteers and say, look, yeah, these kids have been through trauma. Yeah, these kids have seen a lot, but they're still kids. They're extremely resilient. When a consistent and reliable adult steps into their lives, it might take 3, 4, 5 weeks, but all of a sudden they respond. They're like, oh, you know, they won't say it. Well, sometimes they say it out loud, but it's like, thank God I've got somebody I can rely on, because my world is upside down. And that's, I think, more than, as much as advocating for the youth is important, being a mentor and just that solid rock that kids can hold on to is huge. It's huge, huge.
Yeah, that is huge. I mean, outside of the technicalities and all the support that's needed from a CASA, that's one thing that I loved as a volunteer, is you're just there for the kid. And, you know, one of my cases started off in Auburn, and it was supposed to be a short case, and then the kid got moved to Pacifica, and then he got moved to Placerville, and then he was back to Auburn. And although he moved around a lot, I was the one consistent person that saw him almost every week, and it does help a lot. So do you guys have any questions on the volunteer stuff? I mean, one thing I will say is being a CASA is not for everybody. And if you refer a volunteer because it's not right for you, it's the same, just because they need bodies. And so I think recognizing that and then thinking about all the people in your life, who has the time and the capacity and the heart to help a foster kid through, their situation. That would be awesome. So Roy, Parmees, do you guys have any questions?
You mentioned there's a you say there's a CASA in Sacramento?
Yes, there, Sacramento, CASA, Yolo, El Dorado, San Joaquin County. Pretty much every county in California has its own CASA program assigned to its superior court.
Nice. Yeah, actually, I was doing, we can't do open houses, and so I do my virtual open houses. And when I do virtual open houses, I do Instagram Live, and then I typically interview a partner or either a community leader or advocate on my Instagram Live while I'm actually at a property. And yesterday I just interviewed one of an instructor with Los Rios College, who, and I was just asking him exactly how COVID-19 or the pandemic's affecting the school district, because a lot of our friends are educators. And so, and then he was just letting me know that, these are, like you said, these systems are pretty much right now are all compromised and non-existent for a lot of the kids and youth, and especially the ones who, even before they even get into the system within the county of experiencing trauma with CPS and everything else, like now, like you said, trying to figure out, making sure like what's happening with the kids right now. And now that they're at home, they feel lost and all of this stuff. So it's amazing that you guys are actually doing this. I had no idea this organization was even around. So a lot of things we kind of take for granted, not say for granted, but we kind of forget, because as adults and providers, our goal is to provide shelter and security for our families, and then of course in helping other families provide shelter and security through home ownership. And then you have this happen, and then a lot of the kids who depend on their parents and all of these structures and systems, such as the schools, their teachers, guardians, all of that is gone, and now you're like, what are they doing? So it's like I said, I commend you guys. It's an amazing program. Definitely would love to get more information on it. My wife actually, she worked for the county of Sacramento with CPS. So she was the one who actually worked in the courthouse. She would actually take care of the children when they would need to go to court, right? So there's an area, like a play area, but like an area where the kids get dropped off. She knows all the social workers. She knows all the attorneys, all the judges. She's worked there for like she's almost 20 years or so. And she was telling me exactly, not any of the cases per se, but a lot of the stuff that was happening as far as system wise, and a lot of the kids just, falling between the cracks, and constantly a cycle of them. When they're in, it's hard to kind of get them out, right? Especially if they grow up into this system and everything else. So kind of familiar with it, but yeah, like I said, I commend you guys, Nick and Don, for what you guys are doing. I'd like probably get more involved or get more information on the Sacramento one.
Yeah. Well, I think that's can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. I think that's why Nick and I started talking, and the questions that I had for Don in the midst of what's going on right now, because I think it's just really crucial that these new kiddos that have entered and are yet to have a CASA representative, like that is, all of the other systems have been shut down right now that are those consistent adults that are able to have eyes on these kids, right? It's like the shelter in place has basically limited the ability to have eyes on any of these kids anymore from a healthy perspective, because right now we're so isolated into our own single unit home lives. And so if those adults are not in a stable place to advocate for their own children, then no one is. But it sounds like if a kid is assigned a CASA representative, then they still have some ability to interact and keep up with those kids, right? It's virtually right now, Don, but you're hoping that that will change quickly alongside the social worker, you know, rules and regulations where they can actually go and continue to visit the kids. Yeah.
Okay, and then the money aspect, you know, fundraising. Should they go to the website or should they reach out to Julie or somebody if they want to do their own, maybe their own little mini fundraiser? I saw somebody did a virtual dance party and took donations to attend a virtual dance party, which I thought was, you know, kind of cool.
Yeah.
But you know, if somebody has their own idea to get their groups of friends together, I mean, I think any way to get connected with your friends online just to stay sane.
Don, sorry, Don, how much did you say you needed to raise?
Well, we lost through our events about $60,000. So I'm looking now at a deficit of this year of maybe around 40,000, maybe 30,000. So, you know, whatever we can pull together would be great. Yeah, that's, but through Big Day of Giving, we're looking at 30,000, and that would be that would be $30 from 1,000 people, and it would give us $30,000 to provide a cost for 30 kids for a year.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And
So
then you need
$30 from 1,000 people, $30,000, and that covers 30 children for the year.
Yeah.
And then you need how many more representatives? Like how many kids are not represented right now?
Just about 50. I think maybe it's 48. I think they matched 2 yesterday. We did put out a call to our old volunteers who are, you know, haven't been with us for years, and had 2 pop up from their last case in 2014. And so because we're recording our trainings, we're putting them through the last couple extra new trainings and getting back online. So yeah, our goal is to really ramp up, and we're looking to hire another case supervisor to handle the extra load in July. So yeah.
How many volunteers do you want?
Many. I would say we could use, I mean, literally, if we had 30 people walk in the door tomorrow, we could match them all. We could probably match 50 tomorrow if they were trained. And because they would not only become CASAs, but also, you know, could be family mentors. They could be, you know, allies within Prosper Placer. So 50 new volunteers in the next, you know, 3-4 months would be incredible.
Okay, so you need 50 volunteers in the next 3-4 months. That would be amazing. And $30,000. That's like basically what you would love to have.
Yes.
And the training for brand new volunteers can all be done virtually now in the midst of all of kind of the restrictions. Okay.
Yeah.
And how long does that take? And what's the commitment from a volunteer? How long of a commitment? And how long is the training?
30 hours of training, which is half of that is online and half of that is through these Zoom videos. And then you have to get cleared through fingerprinting, all the background checks. So it takes a while, probably takes, depends on the person, but typically the class takes 4 to 5 weeks to get everyone through the class. Once we get all of our current class wraps up in May 7th, and once that's done, we'll have all the classes online. We might be able to speed that process up.
Okay.
It's new territory for us.
And the commitment to a child is how long for a volunteer?
Typically a year. So your job is to meet with the child once a week, and again, it's virtually right now. But initially, the obligation is about 12 hours a month because you're meeting with, or you're trying to reach out to teachers, therapists, social workers, and so forth. Once that happens, it's mostly about meeting with your kid once a week. Again, it's virtual at this point. And then the commitment, typically a case runs about 12 months. They can go longer, but they can also be, especially the little tiny ones, the 5 and unders, those wrap up usually within 6 months. We have a lot of those. So.
Cool. Awesome. Any other questions? I mean, I think, Dawn, anything else you want the community to know?
No, those are great questions.
Yeah. Really good questions. Well, I think we're probably good.
Yeah.
I hope everybody's healthy and safe. And thanks, Dawn. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.